I was betrayed. I almost lost everything. But I discovered the truth and got my life back. I never thought we'd get to this point. My name is Rogerio. I'm 38 years old. And today I know how wrong I was about the life I was leading. I always tried to do everything right, maintain balance in my marriage, believe that love and patience can solve any problem. But that day, everything fell apart. I woke up early, as usual, and felt something strange, a restlessness in my stomach that I couldn't explain. It wasn't just fatigue, it was a subtle but firm fear that something was wrong. I began to notice the signs I'd ignored for months. Deleted messages, meaningless apologies, fleeting glances. The feeling of betrayal began to creep in slowly, but with a force I could no longer deny, and I knew I had to react, even if I didn't yet know how. My mother, Need, has always been my rock. I called her that same day, just to vent a little, and I felt a mixture of shame and relief at the same time. Shame for having allowed my life to get to this point without realizing it. Relief for being able to trust someone who wouldn't judge me. She listened to me silently, simply guiding me with simple words that seemed to clear a forest of confusion and pain. It was in her that I found the first spark of courage. And in that moment, I realized that the war wouldn't just be against my wife, but against all the fear I had of losing my dignity. Throughout the morning, I began reviewing everything. Documents, accounts, investments, anything that could be used against me. The feeling of desperation was overwhelming, a mixture of anger, exhaustion, and fear of feeling vulnerable. But mixed with this, I began to feel something different: clarity. Every detail I'd previously ignored fell into place, and I realized the scale of the plan Camilla and Raphael had devised. It was a shock to feel that someone so close to me could manipulate my entire life for their own benefit. My heart raced, my head spun, but I knew I had to maintain control, or everything I'd achieved would disappear. The turning point came when I realized that acting calmly would be my greatest weapon. I could despair, scream, or give in to anger, but that wouldn't solve anything. I took a deep breath, sat down at the table, and began writing a plan, step by step. Transfer my assets to a trust. Make any scam impossible. The feeling of fear and anxiety was still there, but now mixed with a strength I hadn't felt in years. It was the first time I felt truly in control of my life, after months of manipulation and deception. It was a mixture of relief and tension, because I knew the confrontation was still coming, but at least now, I had a real chance of winning. Meanwhile, messages from Camilla began arriving. Invitations to talk, veiled accusations, indirect messages. In the past, I would have fallen for each one, trying to explain, justify, and soothe. But that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: resistance. Each of her words no longer shook me. I read, breathed, and continued my plan. It was strange, feeling anger and fear at the same time, but not letting them get the better of me. For the first time, I understood that protecting my dignity and my life would require composure, strategy, and patience. And in that moment, between fear and clarity, I realized the transformation had begun. In the middle of that day, I went to the bank to begin arranging the transfer of assets. Each step felt heavy, as if each decision carried an emotional weight I couldn't handle. I felt angry at myself for having trusted so much, guilty for not realizing it sooner, and afraid that everything could still go wrong. At the same time, I felt a strange strength growing within me. It was as if each document signed, each step taken, was proof that I still had control over my life. I felt like I was rebuilding myself there, paragraph by paragraph, decision by decision. It was painful, but also liberating. I finally realized I no longer needed to depend on anyone to protect my future. When I left the bank, I felt like screaming, like I wanted to expel everything that was bottled up inside me. But I didn't. I just walked, breathing slowly, feeling every heartbeat, every confusing thought that insisted on coming. I allowed myself to feel anger and fear, but without drowning in them. It was strange to realize how something as simple as walking down the street could be simultaneously frightening and empowering. Every person I passed seemed normal, indifferent, and I felt more alive than ever, aware that my struggle wasn't just financial but emotional, psychological, a battle for who I truly was. Later, I spoke with Bruno, someone I never imagined could help me so directly. He told me things I didn't yet know, truths that hurt but were necessary. Each word increased my clarity about the entire situation, but also increased my anger and indignation. I felt betrayed, disgusted by Camilla and Raphael's coldness, but at the same time, I began to feel a kind of relief at finally seeing everything clearly. Knowing the truth, even if painful, empowered me. I realized I no longer needed to delude myself, that the fight would now be real, conscious, and strategic. As the afternoon wore on, I sat alone, reflecting on everything that was happening. It wasn't easy to admit to myself that the marriage I believed to be solid was destroyed, that the person I trusted most was trying to manipulate me. Shame mixed with anger, and for a few minutes I felt exhausted, ready to give up. But then I realized that giving up would mean giving up everything, allowing my dignity to be stripped away, and I couldn't do that. It was a moment of stark clarity. Either I fought back or I would lose everything, not just the money, but my identity, my strength, my very emotional life. That day, as night fell, I finally took a deep breath and realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Even with the pain, even with the fear, there was a light I could reach. I had made concrete decisions, protected what was mine, and most importantly, begun to protect myself emotionally. The war was still to come, but now I was ready for it. For the first time, I felt I could win, not only financially, but also emotionally, that I could rebuild my life from that day forward. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but the sense of control brought a relief I hadn't known I needed. The next morning, I woke with a strange mix of anxiety and determination. My body still felt the weight of the previous day, the physical and mental exhaustion, but something had changed. I was no longer lost, no longer at the mercy of the plan Camilla and Raphael had devised. I felt as if I had opened my eyes to something that had always been right in front of me, but which I couldn't see. Every detail that had previously made me insecure was now a piece on my board. I knew the road would be long and that the pain wouldn't disappear immediately, but for the first time in months, I felt capable of facing anything. At work, I tried to focus, but my mind wouldn't stop. I thought about every message, every gesture, every lie I'd uncovered. Anger came in waves, mixed with a deep, almost paralyzing exhaustion. But along with it, I felt a strength I'd never known. I was learning to defend myself not with shouting or confrontation, but with strategy and patience. I realized that the greatest weapon I had wasn't anger, but clarity. Knowing the truth, understanding what was happening, allowed me to act intelligently. This awareness gave me a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years, a certainty that I could still rebuild my life. Later, I spoke with my mother again. She sat with me, held my hand, and simply listened. She didn't tell me to fight or give up, but she made me realize I wasn't alone. Feeling her presence, her silent confidence in me, brought a sense of relief that mixed tears with strength. For the first time, I understood that my victory wouldn't just be financial, but emotional. That what I needed to protect was my own dignity, my self-esteem, and my sense of who I truly was. And there, feeling every word and every gesture, I realized that the rebuilding had truly begun. As I walked home, I mentally replayed each step of the plan, transferring the assets, ensuring nothing could be used against me, protecting my life in concrete ways. With each decision, I felt an intense mix of fear and relief. It was strange to realize the fear still existed, but it no longer paralyzed me. it transformed into action. Each step I took was a reminder that I still had control over my life, that I no longer needed to submit to manipulation and lies. It was like breathing after being drowned by months of silent betrayal. When I got home, I saw messages from Camilla trying to provoke me, blame me, and confuse me. In the past, I would have fallen for each one, responded to every word, tried to explain and justify, but that day I simply ignored them. I felt a strange mixture of anger, disdain, and relief. Anger at what she had done, disdain at realizing her attempts at manipulation were no longer working, and relief at finally being in control. For the first time, I felt like I could decide my own narrative without relying on anyone else. It was the beginning of a silent but intense victory, one that still carried pain, but also an emotional rebirth. In the days that followed, every message from Camilla felt like a desperate attempt to throw me off balance, but I was no longer the same man who kept quiet and tortured himself inside. I felt anger, of course, but mixed with a quiet strength that grew with her every gesture. I realized the power was in my hands now, not hers. Every unanswered word, every silence maintained was proof that I was no longer at the mercy of manipulation. And this feeling, though painful, gave me a confidence I never imagined I had. I began to realize that the most important battle wasn't for money, but for my own dignity and peace of mind. At one point, I sat alone on the couch, mentally reviewing everything that had happened. The feeling of exhaustion mixed with relief and a strange excitement. I realized that even in the midst of pain, I was learning something essential about myself. I could be strong, even when everything seemed to be conspiring against me. Every plan executed, every step toward protecting my life and my future was a reminder that I no longer needed to rely on anyone to defend me. It was a raw, intense learning experience that burned and healed at the same time. My mother remained my safe haven. She didn't give me easy answers or ready-made words. She simply listened and guided me firmly. And her presence made me realize that I could still trust, that I could still rely on something real and human, even after so many lies and betrayals. The feeling of not being alone made the pain lessen, even if only slightly, and hope grow. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I could, in fact, rebuild my life. At the same time, I began to reflect on myself and my choices. It wasn't easy to admit that at many times I ignored the signs, closed my eyes to things that bothered me, and exposed myself to vulnerability without realizing it. The anger I felt now was also anger at myself, but not in a destructive way. It was anger that made me more aware, more attentive, stronger. Each past mistake became a learning experience. Each frustration became fuel to avoid repeating the same patterns. The most striking moment was realizing that, despite everything, I could still choose my posture, my actions, my peace. It wasn't a victory over Camila or Raphael, but over my own life and my own decisions. For the first time in months, I felt a mixture of lightness and empowerment, even though the pain of betrayal was still raw. It was there, that day, sitting, alone, reflecting on every detail, that I realized the transformation wouldn't happen from the outside in, but from the inside out, and that my overcoming, though painful, was real, intense, and had already begun. Over the next few days, I began to notice changes within myself that surprised me. The anger was still there, but it no longer dominated me. The fear of losing everything, which had previously been overwhelming, began to give way to a calm, almost strange confidence. I realized that every step I took to protect my finances was also protecting my peace of mind. And this clarity brought something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I could finally breathe without feeling like the ground would drop out from under me at any moment. My relationship with my mother became even more important during this process. She not only supported me, but also helped me realize my own strength. We talked about every step, every decision, and I felt I wasn't alone. This support was essential for me to realize that victory wasn't just material, but emotional as well. I was learning to value myself again, to trust my own choices, and not depend on those who had betrayed me. The feeling was liberating, but also painful because I still carried the scars of everything I'd been through. One day, as I reviewed my decisions and realized I had shielded my life, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Pride in myself, in not having succumbed to manipulation, in having found strength. Didn't even know I had. This mixture of pride and relief brought tears, but they were tears of resilience, not despair. For the first time, I could imagine my future without the weight of betrayal and constant manipulation. I felt ready to move forward, even knowing some scars would remain. The psychological warfare continued, of course, but now I was prepared. Every provocative message, every attempt at manipulation only strengthened my resolve. I learned to protect myself, maintain my emotional balance, and act intelligently without giving in to destructive emotions. It was strange to feel so much strength mixed with vulnerability, but I realized that this was part of real life. Victory wasn't about humiliating anyone, but about reclaiming my own life, my dignity, and my peace. Looking back today, I can see how decisive that day was. I not only protected my assets, but I also rebuilt my confidence, strength, and self-esteem. I still feel the pain, the memory of betrayal, the weight of disappointment, but I also feel clarity, strength, and hope. I learned that overcoming doesn't mean erasing the pain, but learning to walk with it, without letting it destroy me. And as difficult as it was, I know I was able to bounce back. I am Rogerio, and today I feel stronger, more aware, and more alive than ever. With each passing day, I felt my confidence grow. Before, I'd let myself be driven by fear and manipulation, but now I realized my strength came from within. I didn't depend on anyone to feel capable or worthy. The feeling of being in control of my own life, even with all the open wounds, was liberating. I began to believe that I could not only survive but thrive, that my life didn't need to be defined by what others did to me, but by what I chose to do for myself. I started setting small daily goals, simple things that reminded me I could still move forward. Getting up early, organizing my finances, focusing on work, taking care of myself. Each small victory gave me energy for the next. It was incredible to realize how simple but consistent actions could completely change my perception of myself. I was no longer a victim. I was rebuilding myself step by step with patience and determination. The pain of betrayal was still there, but I learned to live with it in a healthy way. I no longer let it define my actions or thoughts. Instead, I used each memory as fuel to strengthen me. Each tear became motivation to prove to myself that I could be happy again, that I could create a future where my peace and dignity were non-negotiable. I began to realize that my life was my responsibility and that I could shape it however I chose. One of the greatest lessons from this period was realizing that strength doesn't come from destroying others, but from rebuilding oneself. I could have sought revenge, but I understood that true victory lay in regaining my own emotional freedom. Each step I took toward this freedom filled me with pride and made me believe that the future could be lighter, safer, and full of possibilities. It was a tough learning experience, but one that made me more aware and resilient. Today, when I look back on everything I've been through, I feel a mixture of pride, gratitude, and hope. I know the pain and scars are still with me, but I also know I've managed to transform them into motivation. I can get up every day knowing I can face any challenge, protect my life, and grow even after being betrayed. This overcoming has shown me that no matter how difficult the situation, it's always possible to bounce back, regain control, and become stronger than before.